welcome to episode 43 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and I'm joined today, as always, by Evan. Thank you for letting me know it's episode 43, Evan.
Anytime. I have all sorts of fascinating information.
Can you lay some more on me?
Secret tales. Today is Thursday,
You're right.
I think. Wait, no, I'm not sure.
No, it definitely is. You're right.
Nice! See, I told you.
Yeah,
See?
that's pretty good.
See, I knew what day it was.
You did better than me. That's actually not true. I also knew what day it was.
Whatever you say.
I know. I'm sorry.
So it's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I've been playing a lot of Magic Arena. That's been pretty sweet.
Yeah. I think that's that's definitely a big reason. You've also been kicking butt at your cool new job.
Yep. Yeah, so I think I've been a busy boo. But, it's, I'm definitely down and happy to be talking about Hearthstone again. This game that, we all know and love. And have absolutely no
the
problem
King's
with.
game.
The King's game.
Yes, that's what they call it.
Yeah, definitely. Is there like a Yu-Gi-Oh reference in there?
When I said it in my head earlier before the episode when I was taking a dump, because that's obviously when I thought of something like that, I thought of Yu-Gi-Oh immediately.
It's because I think it's probably Glory of the King's Hand.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and why that's coming out.
There should be some Hearthstone lore, like, whoa, it's actually real. Like, there's, Sylvanas is hanging out, in Manhattan somewhere.
That would be sweet.
She's like, yeah, I cost 6. What about it?
I feel like I was going to say...
They had a Hall of Fame me.
So I was about to say, I feel like if there was a Warcraft con, I would totally go. But there is a BlizzCon, which has got to be a Warcraft con. It's like a Warcraft and Overwatch con, And I've never gone, so I definitely am not gonna commit to that one.
Yeah, I mean now there's definitely got to be some Hearthstone activity at the Blizzard convention.
I feel like it's interesting because it's all in the Warcraft universe, so they're the same characters. But I feel like you could make it obvious that it was Hearthstone just with like the seriousness of the portrayal. Or, also, some of the characters. Like, for example, if I saw Dr. Boom walking around, I would definitely know it was Hearthstone.
Yeah, that person wasn't like, wow, this boss from World of Warcraft is great.
Right, this is my favorite Warcraft character.
Is this random boss?
Is Leper Gnome.
I mean, but, yeah, now if you saw a Leper Gnome, you'd be like, that's the Hearthstone player. Like, someone was, like, a committed Leper Gnome, which would be a really cool costume. And they look at you and they say, "Give me a big hug!"
And then you run away and leave the con and go back to your hotel and lock the door. And then, you're fine. It was a great day. You lived the experience of BlizzCon.
You didn't take 2 damage from a death rattle. No one wants that.
No one wants that. That's like a pretty large fraction of your available life.
As a human.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you probably don't have 30 life. The people who have 30 life are like wizards and warlocks and
and
thrall
children like Anduin.
Well, yeah, but he's a special child.
Yeah, he's like blonde Harry Potter.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. I'll stand by that. So, speaking of blonde Harry Potter, today we wanted to talk about some of the nerfs that have been in it.
Good segue there. I like that.
Well, I mean, so Draco Malfoy is like blonde Harry Potter, but he's definitely a worse character in all respects.
Yeah. So he's kind of blonde opposite Harry Potter. That's the thing.
Yeah, he's blonde anti-Harry Potter, but if you just multiply Harry Potter by -1, you get Draco Malfoy. Add blonde, So I'd say
it depends. Depends how you define opposite. That's something you could just talk about eternally. I found.
Oh yeah.
So let's not do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is.
This is not about Eternal. This is about Hearthstone.
That is true.
Pokemon. This is about Pokemon.
It's also not about Artifact, which is coming out. So
I've heard of that. Don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I still know very little about it. Anyway.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it should be cool. So a bunch of cards were nerfed or are going to be nerfed pretty soon. I guess these nerfs appear somewhat reactionary, but not all of them. So I think
there's 3.
There are three. I think the first one that's listed on the Play Hearthstone website is Giggling Inventor, which I think is perhaps the most reactionary of them.
It's definitely the most predictable, right?
I think so.
If you hear they're nerfing something, you're like, Giggling Inventor is one of the cards. Because it is in a lot of decks, and they usually don't like that because it reduces, like how varied things are.
Yeah.
And it also is a particularly slowing down-ish card. So it kind of makes things more boring, maybe?
Yeah, I think
it just stalls.
It definitely favors a certain type of strategy, which is like a mid-range and not an aggro. So what they're doing to Giggling Inventor is making it cost 7. It used to cost 5, so 5 mana for a 2/1 that summoned 2/1/2 Max of Taunt Divine Shield. Now is a 7 mana card.
Hello.
So this is pretty significant nerf. Generally when something jumps up by 2 mana cost, that's a sign that it was very, very, very strong. Here I think that's a little bit less so, or it's a little bit harder to make that argument because they have to worry about Baku and Gen. So changing it from 5 to 6 actually just changes the decks that it can go into, and there might be some decks that are happy to play it at 6.
Yeah, it's ultimately a really strong card, I think.
Yeah.
And at 5 is like really underpriced. And maybe 6 is right on the money or close to it. Definitely a lot closer. Because it's usually the perfect number is usually not a whole number.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I've concluded between Magic cards and Hearthstone cards and all that. Really, if you could pick a perfect number for mana cost for each card, it would be some very specific decimal. This one, I guess maybe it is above 6, but below 7. But like you said, even Paladin would friggin' love this card.
Oh yeah. I mean that would be actually awesome for even Paladin.
And I think even Warlock could consider it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think even Warlock has some filler as is, so I'm sure it'd be happy to play something like Giggling Adventure. Though its mid-range game is already pretty good. It's kind of glutted around 6 anyway.
There's some pretty great things you can do at 6, like Black Knight.
Yeah, and there's also like Dread Infernal, which I think actually appears in lists.
It's very good. Skulking Geist as well.
Totally.
I cut my Geist, but I kept my Infernal.
Yeah, Infernal's it's really excellent for Gul'dan, which is like still one of the better cards in Standard.
That's the deck right there.
Yep.
And that's like the one argument I could see for the Giggling Inventor in even Warlock is that you're just trying to stall to get to Gul'dan, so it could have been good in that way. But
oh yeah, most certainly.
Potentially still not good enough. But they skipped this problem by making it 7. I think another reason they did that is because, like, if they undershot it, like if they nerfed it once and had to nerf it again because it wasn't enough, that'd like be embarrassing.
Oh, you mean like the Caverns Below?
Yes.
Yeah, they've already played that game before.
And consistently doing that kind of hurts their appearance and makes it seem like maybe they don't know what they're doing or something like that.
I think it goes...
at least some of that, I think.
It goes against the design philosophy they have with respect to nerfs. So, we've definitely talked about this before, but some games are really... some games embrace the fact that they are never going to be perfect or near perfect, and it's going to need constant adjustment, and so they turn it into a feature rather than a constraint. So League of Legends, I think, is a really excellent example of this, where there are really major balance changes often, and some characters get changed and changed back and changed and reworked, and then it's so the changes are like they're constant.
Weekly, like every week, there's like a whole new list of updates to characters and stuff.
It's certainly frequent, yeah.
It used to be weekly.
Yeah, I know they used to do like a new champion every week or every 2 weeks or something like that.
That was wild times.
Yeah, that was also a really long time ago. Now that I'm thinking about that, but yeah. Anyway, so they so they've embraced, like, as part of their game design philosophy, that they're going to need to iterate often, and that's going to be part of how they keep their game fresh, is by changing which characters are good. Because if you play League with a whole new 5 champions, on your team than you did last week, you might as well be playing a different game, or at least, a similar game, but with drastically different mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Hearthstone has really the opposite perspective, which is a lot more like a traditional card game. They recognize that changing their cards they just don't do it very often. Because, like, in Magic, changing your cards is nearly impossible.
Yeah, they can't, for one, they can't literally do it.
Yes,
like,
yes.
If you already have copies, those are the way they are.
Right. There are cards that are on paper, and they function in a particular way as they're printed. And if you want to make a change to the meaning of the card, or to what the card does, which has been done before with erratas and whatnot, you end up with a really confusing situation. So, for example, one thing they did over the last 5 years was add creature super types to cards, so like human or elf or whatever. So a lot of cards that were just soldier are now human soldier, but the old cards still have the word soldier on them. So you see them, you really don't know what the creature type is when you see a card that just has soldier on it, if it's old.
And yeah, like an old Icatian Javelineers, I think, might say like summon Icatian Javelineers.
Yeah,
like they would just say summon and then the name of the card as the creature type. But he's probably a human soldier now, and it doesn't say that anywhere, which is confusing. But I guess part of the reason they know they can get away with that kind of change is because that old Icatian Javelineers won't come up often with new players, right? So
certainly
people that don't know that should encounter it less. In Hearthstone, though, since you have to log in, they can guarantee that when you log in, you get a message that says, "Hey, we just changed these cards. If you want to get rid of your copies, you can at their full value, and the card will now say the different words." So it's much more realistic in Hearthstone.
Yeah, but yet they still don't change very often, which is really interesting.
And I think it would. Part of the reason, I don't know, I feel like it would sort of make the cards feel less valuable if they were frequently becoming bad. Like, it doesn't really feel as good, I think, to have a collection if large pieces of it randomly get nerfed. Well, not randomly, but frequently.
Yes, I think
even if you get the dust back, it's still... You can't really... You want to accumulate the cards, you don't want to accumulate dust.
Yeah. So in a way, I feel like that's almost aesthetic. Like, because you could make the same argument, you have a collection of digital goods that you play with. They happen to be cards because this is a card game. But you can make the same argument about, on League of Legends, your collection of champions.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you can't cash the champions in for a resource that you could trade for other champions. But unless you can now, I don't know. But you used to not be able to do that. And in the Hearthstone, you can do that. But, like, I still think you have a collection of digital goods in both cases. Though, like, when I say I think it's aesthetic, is that this is supposed to feel like, I guess, and resemble a collection of physical cards. And so they're treating it like that. But I think what I'm doing mostly is pointing out how the reason physical cards aren't changed so often, or one of them, perhaps the most compelling reason, is that there's a real actual constraint to it. But in the digital cards, the constraint doesn't exist, but it's still part of their design philosophy. Not necessarily a mistake, but just definitely interesting to note that.
Yeah, they know the experience of the real cards is fun, and people like that. And so they just made that happen in the digital game.
Yeah,
intentionally.
Definitely, yeah. It comes with the connotation of collection and accumulation and, like, wanting to get more of them. And, like, I think that definitely helps out their business model if they can ride on somebody's pre-existing, preconceived expectations of how a thing's going to work in order to sell more of the thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and, they knew they could just take these few ideas that are familiar and then do a whole new different thing and take advantage of the digital medium, and have all sorts of crazy stuff.
most definitely.
And then also be able to fix it sometimes.
Yeah, so it's what I do like that they've embraced that nerfs are necessary and they do them periodically, like once or twice in expansion, or actually even less frequent, probably 1.x times per expansion. So that's really great. But
I agree.
Yeah, so I mean, Giggling Adventure nerf is really big. This will probably shake things up a bit. I think that there are a lot of decks that were kind of leaning on having this in there in order to make them functional. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
They got a lot better with this card. Like I think Control Warrior is like, should I run this at 7? Like I think they're still thinking about playing it.
Right. Yeah, certainly odd variants would be, or I feel like Odd Rogue definitely really liked having this card in their deck.
Yep, Odd Rogue loved it. Sadly, it's gonna come out of my Quest Rogue deck, but those are some good times.
Yeah, that's actually one of the decks that's named here in this article. The article on the official Hearthstone website is
really?
Quest Rogue. Yeah,
I have not read it. What does it say?
It just says we expect that it'll find its way into fewer decks in general and be much less effective than Quest
Rogue. They're always worrying about Quest Rogue.
It's really funny. It's funny how much of a problem that's caused for them.
I'm so glad. I'm glad I've contributed.
I'm happy about it too, honestly. Just the more, it's like every time it comes up and it's like, oh, well, it's a deck again. It's just really, really funny. That this deck
is third time's a charm, right?
Because it's not like it survived nerfs like, they nerfed some key cards in the deck, but the core strategy is still intact. It's just like not viable anymore. They just like keep nerfing the card, the singular card, the quest in the deck, and all the cards around it. And like it's still just like, nope, I work.
People find a way.
Yeah, but I think that deck will be a lot worse without a 5-mana Giggling Adventure.
There's also some Druid decks that I think really liked it. The Token Druid deck loves this card. And even there's some stally ones that are like playing like Mechathon, or you can play them in your Malagos Druid. There's like different like unpleasant Druid decks that were using this card, so those are also gonna get toned down a little bit. That's like the one way in which Druid and Standard is hit. But yeah, fortunately, that Malfurion's also going down with the rest of the decks that aren't even Warlock.
Yeah, I mean, those lists are already pretty tight, so I feel like you could probably just replace Giggling Inventor. Those decks don't feel like they're leaning on it as much as stuff like Quest Rogue or some of the odd aggro decks.
Yeah, like once again, Druid's the best.
Yes, yeah,
no question there.
It just has such a huge pool of cards that go in every single deck. It's like really big, and then all the decks play the same way, and because of their ramp mechanic, they can play cards at basically any mana cost. So they have a huge card pool available to them. So if you remove one of their better cards, the second best is probably still decent.
Naturally.
So speaking of Druid, Druid was doing some stuff in Wild, and Aviana was part of that. So Aviana got nerfed from 9 mana to 10 mana.
And what does Aviana do, Bart?
Definitely worth mentioning that. So Aviana now is a 10 mana 5/5 that has the text, your minions cost 1. So they cost 1 mana.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So you used to be able to do something like play 9 mana Aviana, and then you have 1 mana, but all your minions cost 1, so you can play a 1 mana Kun the Forgotten King, which would refresh your mana crystals back to 10.
That sounds like you could do some pretty stupid stuff from there, Bart.
Yes, indeed. So
especially with Libidinous Loop.
Yeah, most definitely. You can do some really stupid stuff.
Some really, really mean things to other people on the internet.
Yeah, definitely. So,
they're toning that down.
Yeah, they're toning that down a bit. It was kind of, if you're subscribed at all to our Wild Hearthstone, whether you consent to it or not, you'd be constantly assaulted with the fact that Druid is very strong in Wild. So, um,
wait, Druid is the best class in Wild also.
Wait a minute. When all classes have an expanded card pool, it's Druid. So I mean, in that case, it's actually like, there's some in Wild. There's a lot of strong cards like Totem Golem. So the fact that Druid is really
Boom
and Mysterious Challenger, and Varian Rin, but no. So Druid was very strong in Wild as well. So this is actually a Wild targeted nerf, which is pretty interesting. They don't really do that very often, but I think the community got loud enough about how strong Druid was there, and Aviana was a really big part of that. They could just have this massive swing turn where you could play so much mana worth of creatures very, very easily. And the card Juicy Psych Melon, which draws like a 7, 8, 9, and 10 mana card from your deck, just made it so that happened really often.
Yeah, that is something that has not come up in Standard as far as I know, but sounds perfect in that situation. I mean, it still sounds like that deck could be good. You can use Innervate to still do crazy stuff with Aviana at 10 mana.
That's definitely true.
It could still be a thing, but I didn't know. I don't pay any attention to Wild. If I'm playing Wild, I'm playing some complete nonsense deck. Just like Anyfin Shaman.
Sure, yeah.
Or Cthulhu Shudderwalk Shaman.
That's awesome.
It's a good time. One card that made it a lot better is Omega Defender, because his battle cry is just 10 attack. Which is what you need.
You need cards that can just kill your opponent before the game goes too late and they realize you don't do anything.
That actually happens a lot at rank 23. that they very often just get there, honestly.
I can imagine.
They are 12 6s for 4.
Yeah, it's pretty strong. So this is so I mean, like we said, in Wild, nerfs don't really happen all that often. I think Wild is like pretty generally, I'd say, undersupported. I think it could have more players than it actually does, but for various reasons, I guess, they don't really care too much about it or something. But either way, here they are, nerfing it and sort of putting their money where their mouth is as far as saying they care about it, which is awesome.
I agree 100%. It's great that they're doing anything, and the fact they did something shows that they're paying attention, and they definitely know that newer players are going to be more interested in Standard, because that's the new cards are in Standard. And it's just they kind of realized at a point after Hearthstone didn't have, for a while Hearthstone was just Hearthstone. There was no Standard in Wild, and then they were like, okay, this is getting out of hand. We're gonna make this division. And it's because they knew that managing and balancing everything while also making super creative cards with everything available was going to become impossible. Or at least way too difficult. They would have to make much more boring cards from here on in if they only had Wild, right? If Hearthstone was just all cards.
Oh, sure.
And so they had to make Standard. And now the new players are going to be playing with the new cards, which are in Standard. So it does make a lot of sense to support Standard more than Wild. But it would definitely have been a bummer if they were never doing anything for Wild. And that's not the case. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's
happy about that.
It's interesting. I mean, I think that there's also business and financial reasons why they might support Standard more. Like, if you imagine let's say they pushed Wild really hard and they got a lot of new players in Wild who wanted to build new decks that had old cards in them. So their only option for getting these old cards would be to make some of the old booster packs available in the store. Mm-hmm. And then if you do that, like, you suddenly, clutter up your UI and make the game more confusing to a new player. Like,
yeah, there's definitely more stuff like to it than that.
But it's all money related ultimately.
Yeah, I think so too. And then the other thing is just, Standard is a newer card, so it sells more new packs. And like that's just, as opposed to if you look at a game like Magic, for example, the old formats like Legacy and Vintage, just they don't sell any sealed product whatsoever. And all of the sale that happens in those formats is actually on the secondary market, and Wizards of the Coast doesn't see any of that money. So it's like they it doesn't really benefit them too much to support WoW. That doesn't mean they shouldn't. I'm just making an argument why they might not have. And I think like the experience of keeping the UI clean is like I think players tend to undervalue that and kind of turn it into a meme. But it is, even as an entrenched player, a really nice thing about the game.
Yeah, that's something that pretty much I can appreciate anytime I'm playing is just the interface. I can stop and look around and be like, "This is nice."
Yeah, it's simple and functional, and like I think that that goes miles in getting players to play your game. So, Hearthstone is a game that I have a hard time recommending to totally new players because it does have a barrier to entry, but I can definitely recommend that they boot it up and install it, and like you know what to do. You press the play button, and then you click the play button. That you select a deck and click play, and then you're playing a game. And like that is also how you play a game when you want to rank up on the ladder as like an entrenched player who's trying to get better and stuff. So it's like it's that there's a lot to be said about that.
Absolutely.
So the last of the nerfs here, I think, is the most loaded one in my opinion. The one that has the most to say. So this is Mana Wyrm, our good friend, old Mana Wyrm, the
Long
1 mana
time,
1/3. So Mana Wyrm, 1 mana 1/3. Whenever you cast a spell, gain 1 attack. In case somehow you didn't know what that card did, and now it costs 2.
2.
That's huge. It's doubling the cost of this card.
100% increase. That's what we call that in the biz, in the King's game.
In the King's game. That sounds like something they could have had like going on in the grimy streets of Gadget Zen. Like just in some back alley, the King's game is some like, chicken fighting ring or something.
Mechanical chickens or angry chickens.
That would be like I don't think they could in good faith print that card for like humanitarian reasons, but that is a missed opportunity.
They probably like they printed it like in headquarters, like while they were play testing. You could play the King's game. It actually made me think of the Grand Tournament, but we can have animals fight each other instead if you want, but.
Yeah, I'm just trying to have that happen.
Mana Wyrm costs 2 now.
This is huge.
Yeah, the card is insane at 1 mana, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just crazy. If you play it turn 1, it's absurd.
Oh yeah,
very often.
So this is, Mana Wyrm is a card that can steal games on its own just by like pushing an early advantage so far that your burn spells can just get the rest of the way there. So there are a lot of decks that really lean on Mana Wyrm existing. The classic Tempo Mage, an archetype that's existed for a very long time in Hearthstone, has always run Mana Wyrm. And even control decks in the last couple of years have turned to putting Mana Wyrm in the deck just because it's such an amazing early game play.
Even like at like any tempo mage, like mech mage, like Mana Wyrm was mech enough. That was like one of the best mechs in the deck was Mana Wyrm.
Sure.
So this was just if you're not playing like Reno, then you're playing 2 copies of this card.
Yeah, and if you're playing Reno, you're probably playing like 1.
Yeah, you can definitely consider 1.
So it's like it's just a really strong card. And part of the reason it's so strong is like it can steal games. It's like I said, this card will gain enough attack, deal enough damage early on before your opponent can do anything about it, and then you have burn spells to close the rest of the distance. So this card really snowballs pretty hard. It's interesting because it doesn't seem like it's a super topical nerf though. So the others are definitely like reactionary and topical, and this one I think is not reactionary. I think that this one is more of a prospective nerf.
Yeah, this is Tempo Mage is not like a common or super powerful deck in any format, as far as I know.
Yeah, certainly not right now.
It's like, I mean, I think it's like a strong deck, and if you're good, you could beat people with it on the ladder. But it's not Druid. It's not pick a Druid deck.
So, I mean, this is so this is pretty interesting. I actually was really expecting this to get Hall of Famed, but this is, I guess, the same thing.
It's very similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that it hurts, wild decks that depend on this card, but I suppose it's, I suppose it makes sense.
It's a pretty unfun experience to get completely wrecked by it.
I think so too.
Part of it can be if your opponent has like the coin, that can make it worse because the coin makes it better. And Primordial Glyph is, it wasn't around when Mana Wyrm was printed, but as an addition to Mage makes Mana Wyrm even better. Like, you can do stupid things with Primordial Glyph and Mana Wyrm if you get lucky enough. The Cosmic Anomaly, I think it's called, the 4-mana 4/3, that gives you, it's got 2 spell damage in Mage.
Right.
Has made things like Arcane Missiles, cheap spells, more playable. So it's just much more. It's very easy to play a Mana Wyrm and get it really big really early. And it's got 3 health, so it's hard to kill. Like, it's got amazing stats. It's a Dire Mole with a whole nother amazing effect.
Yeah, with an incredibly, really synergistic, very powerful effect.
And if you can get it up to a lot of attack on that first turn it attacks, now, like you said, you snowball, you're just smashing your opponent for this big number every turn, starting from the earliest turn. So that winds up just being a ton of damage from one card.
Yeah, it's like you bring up a really interesting point with the coin. So I remember for a long time I really didn't like that the coin was a spell because it synergized with cards like Mana Wyrm and Flame Waker.
Mm-hmm.
Over time I've sort of come around on it because I think it's become a little bit less relevant, but it is definitely I think having the coin and going second in Hearthstone is like generally preferred. There's several articles about this whose results I definitely don't remember, but it's just yet another reason why that's the case. So
I think it's cool because I think there's a lot of different ways in which going second puts you at a disadvantage that are difficult to properly make up for. Just giving the person an extra card doesn't do it.
Right.
And I think giving them 1 extra mana 1 turn maybe also doesn't cut it. In addition to that, maybe you need something else. And maybe that interaction helps shore up that difference.
Yeah, it's targeted only at one class, which is a concern of mine, though. So, like, you could say that on average, this pushes it a few percent, towards the even direction. But, like, I think that there are plenty of non-mage classes that prefer the coin. I know that Pirate Warrior had a heavy coin preference, for example.
Yeah. But that's a good thing. Well, that's a good sign. That means that it's not just the fact that it's a spell that makes it preferred. But, that's I love having the coin in, like, Rogue. It's not just Mage that likes to have extra spells.
Of course, yeah.
With the Spellstones and Priest, it's nice to have the coin. And I think these are all different ways that it just helps make up for going second.
Yeah, I think in the case of Mage, I think that like the coin is like being a spell was mostly a problem because of Mana Wyrm. I think it like felt like it was Flame Waker in the past and maybe was, but I think it's most of the time just that it was annoying with Mana Wyrm because it helped your opponent snowball with Mana Wyrm. Then again, going second and trying to snowball with a 1-drop is like one of the places where going second is like going to be the largest disadvantage.
Yeah, it can still happen though, especially if they use the coin turn 1 with 1 Mana Wyrm to play another Mana Wyrm.
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, if they double up the Mana Wyrms, forget it.
Forget about it.
Yeah. So
But this is certainly very interesting, and actually they highlight that this is part of an ongoing effort to remove oppressive one drops from the game, or to at least going forward make sure there are fewer of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. I feel like that sort of thing, that whole effort perhaps spawned as a result of patches.
He was a pretty good one drop.
Yep. Speaking of oppressive one drops, that was a really depressing era of Hearthstone where the same turn one play existed in almost every deck. So it's nice to not have that be the case anymore.
Yeah, Mana Wyrm still can be very unfun to play against, though. Well, if it comes out turn one at least. So is it still gonna see play at 2 mana? Maybe. I guess probably, right?
I don't know. That's really hard to say. I think that this card going from 1 to 2 is the biggest 1 mana jump you can have, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Well, 0 to 1's a lot too, I guess.
0 to 1 is a lot too, for sure. But yeah, I mean that would take cards like Innervate and Current Innervate and make them unplayable. But it's hard, or like Backstab.
Yeah, it's hard to say that they made Innervate 1 mana now. Just like screw it.
I mean, it actually would have been reasonable at its previous effect, where it produced 2 mana crystals, making it cost 1 mana would have made sense.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
Yeah, I would have differentiated it from Coin. I kind of like what they did, though. I think it's better at 0 mana.
Oh, yeah.
But, so, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say whether it's going to see play or not, because the 2 mana slot in Mage has no shortage of really excellent cards like Arcanologist and Frostbolt and Primordial Glyph.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough to say. It's tough to say whether this will actually fit in, because at its core, this might just be far too slow.
Yeah, so Mana Addict exists and it doesn't use that card.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think the answer is probably no. But I think that this is an interesting opportunity to talk about snowballing cards. So cards that these are cards that if they happen early and they do one particular thing fast enough, or your opponent doesn't have an answer for them, they take the game on their own. And there are a few of these in Hearthstone, and Mana Wyrm is perhaps the most egregious because it costs 1 mana. But I think there are definitely cards that snowball a little harder than Mana Wyrm, but don't cost 1 mana.
Yeah, they tend to be much more of an actual problem if they're really inexpensive. You can get them out early.
Yes,
because you can't. It's very difficult to do any snowballing late game because your opponent will probably has a lot more access to answers and removal and board clear and stuff like that. But early game, that's when it can be the worst. And if one player is snowballing really early with something like Mana Wyrm, their opponent feels like they don't get to play Hearthstone, which is one of the problems with it. Which is one of the reasons why they had to nerf it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Innervate was originally changed, is because it could allow you to just kind of build your own Mana Wyrm. Like, you just get 3 mana crystals before your opponent has a turn and play anything that costs 3 mana, or build a board out of a few cards that is worth 4 or 5 mana before your opponent can really do anything about it, and then just take the fact that you have 4 or 5 mana worth of creatures or 4 or 5 mana worth of stats rather, and then just smack your opponent down. And by the time that they can actually catch up to you, it's way too late.
Well, yeah, that's a perfect example of it, and I think one of the key elements of the snowball is that you need to get it. If you can make it really big early, you can kind of make it unstoppable. You every turn, it might even expand exponentially. It might get bigger. The growth each turn might be bigger. It might be accelerating,
oh yeah, sure.
With Vicious Fledgling, I think that's the case. God. Once you if you can really get it out early and get that first attack in, the sooner you get that first attack and the sooner you get Wind Fury, the sooner you get it to be, untargetable or have Divine Shield, and that will make it hard to kill, and you can get more attack faster and kill your opponent more each turn. And that's a perfect snowball card.
Yeah.
And it was definitely unpleasant on turn 1 off of an innervate.
Oh my god, yeah. Before you have a turn, your opponent's just like innervate fledgling. That is like the sound of that card is just pain.
You can just lose to that on its own.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah, I mean that is a great example of a snowball card because that is like it has all the problems of Mana Wyrm where you want to answer Mana Wyrm really quickly, but if you don't, there's some chance that they just don't have a way to make it better. Vicious Fledgling, like you really have to answer that right away because when it hits you one time, it's going to get better.
It's not conditional. The Mana Wyrm for a long time, I think it was like, well, if you don't have any spells, it's not really that good, conditionally it actually was not that impressive. So I think that's part of the reason they didn't do anything about it for so long, because it's, an original Hearthstone card. It's an OG, sure. And it's gone this long without being changed. So I think that was part of why I got away with it, but as you said, Vicious Fledgling does not have that problem. As long as your opponent's still there, Vicious Fledgling is ready to give him a good smack and become even more smacky immediately thereafter.
Yeah, most certainly. So that is a huge snowball card, and has made for a lot of non-games. That's for sure. I've definitely won a lot of games just where my opponent didn't really get to do anything, but
except watch you drag your Vicious Fledgling over their character.
Yeah, right. But it's still, that card is also a lot more conditional. Like not every deck wants to play it, and it's actually really bad late game play, partly because it costs 3 mana for 3/3, and that's just 3 mana. Whereas Mana Wyrm is actually decent at pretty much all stages. I mean, it's bad if you have an empty hand in its late game, but Mage is really good at not having an empty hand.
That is true, and Fledgling costs 3 versus Mana Wyrm costs 1.
So you can fit did. So you would be able to fit Mana Wyrm into a lot of your plays, whereas Fledgling, later game would not. But also, Fledgling has to stick around for a turn. Mana Wyrm can get kind of big and then just be a big minion for 1 mana, and then it's good enough.
The sooner you get the ball rolling, that's a big part of it. And Mana Wyrm, you can just get it going immediately. Questing Adventurer is a snowball card. But
for sure.
He costs too much. If he costs 2 and was a 1/1, that would be way better, right? Even though we're taking stats off of his body, if you could just play that card earlier, that it just gets infinitely better. If it costs 1, then we're oh whoa, now I just want to play that in everything. A 1 mana minion that gets +1/+1 every time you play a card. That would be that would be extraordinary. It'd be a crazy snowball card. But since he costs 3, he's rather tame and difficult to use really in anything ever except for Quest Rogue. And not Quest Rogue, sorry, Miracle Rogue, and it's a miracle any deck found a way to use it.
Yeah, most certainly. It was that was an older school sort of Miracle Rogue strategy. I don't know whether the current versions are running it, but definitely has a history of showing up in that deck.
It was much better with Conceal. So I think the Wild Miracle Rogue decks might use it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely don't know.
But that's another example. And every turn you can probably play more cards than the last turn. Because, turn 3, when you play him, you spend the whole turn playing him. Turn 4, you only have 4 mana. But turn 5, you'll have 5. And then turn 6, you can play an Auctioneer and play a ton of cards. So it gets better each turn.
Yeah, definitely. It's So yeah, I mean that's certainly a strong snowballing card, and that was a really big part of the Miracle Rogue strategy. Same thing with Edwin Van Cleef, actually. That was a way to just convert all of your cards that did nothing and cost 0 in your hand into a big body. So the idea being that like when it's turn 2 or 3, you can just do a bunch of stupid stuff and then play Event Cleave that's a little bit larger than your opponent can deal with, like a 6/6 or an 8/8, and then your opponent just probably loses to that because at that point in the game they don't have removal spells that can kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're relying on having already played creatures and attacking them and trading them in and then dealing damage somehow, and not every class can do that, not every deck does that, etc., etc. So these are types of effects that like they're okay to exist, snowballing type effects, but you need to be really careful because when cards like this can create non-games, they can create games where you feel like at no point did I have any way of interacting with what my opponent did. The only way I would be if I drew like one particular card really early and played it in the right way, and that can create this experience of feeling like you got really unlucky and feeling like the outcome of the game was not within your power, and then like why bother playing the game at all?
Indeed, it's a bad feeling of like, that was a waste of time. I would have liked to play.
Yeah. So there's I mean these cards also have existed in Magic really historically, and like there's far more examples of Magic, but a few being Pack Rat. So Pack Rat is for the uninitiated a card that is perhaps one of the most powerful limited cards ever printed. Partly because it's just if your opponent plays it, due to the nature of answers in Magic, it's just almost impossible to win after your opponent has played it, and especially if they play it on turn 2. So Pack Rat is a 1/1 for 1 black and a colorless, so 2 mana 1/1, and or 2 mana star, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of rats you control. So it's when you play it, it is a rat, so it's a 1/1, and you can pay 1 black and 1 colorless and discard a card to create a copy of Pack Rat.
Wait, it's only 2 to activate?
I think so.
I've never actually played against the card. I just know that it exists.
Oh, it's 3. It's 3 to activate. I'm sorry. Thank you for catching me there.
Okay. That's what I heard. So, I was like, I think, but you can still just do it immediately. Is the problem?
Yes, you do it the next turn. Yeah. So the idea is that it's not like you're doing this to put a 1/1 rat into play that's just a dumb token. You're putting a copy of Pack Rat into play that has this ability.
Yeah.
So if you play Pack Rat and your opponent kills it, that's it. It's over. If you play Pack Rat and copy it once, your opponent now needs to have 2 kill spells to stop you from doing this. And every single time you do this, you make all of your rats bigger, all of your Pack Rats bigger, and harder to kill because they all have this ability where they can duplicate themselves, even the tokens. So this is this card would snowball like crazy. All your opponent had to do is just like on turn 2 play this and never do anything else except activate the ability.
That's it. Low input requirement. All you need is cards in your hand, and you do need 3rd land drop, but very similar to Vicious Fledgling in that way, in that you don't really need anything else. You just need to get that card on curve or earlier. And you got him.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just so this card created a lot of non-games where your opponent would just play this, and then like it's basically over. If you don't have if you don't have a creature, forget it.
Yeah.
And even if you do, like they could just not attack you. If you don't have a removal spell for it right away, you probably lose. And in Magic, removal spells are rare and limited, so you don't have a lot of them, and they're also they tend to be expensive.
Yeah, this is a turn 2 play. Pack Rat is like a really good example of what I was talking about, how the improvement, not only is the card stronger each turn, but its rate of improvement is bigger, because first you go from a 1/1 to 2 2/2s, and then from that to 3 3/3s, and from that to 4 4/4s. There's like a word for this type of growth. It's like geometric or something, and then 5 5 5 6 6 6s. So you gain the amount of stats you gain each turn is greater.
Oh yeah, so yes, that's definitely true.
It's the growth is growing, and that's like that's the kind of the scariest kind of snowball, and that's what fledgling is. And you could even say Mana Wyrm is that, because if you play Mana Wyrm turn 1, and your opponent doesn't kill it, and then you start playing a bunch of spells, well, that means that you're doing something, and, like, you're getting ahead because you're playing a bunch of spells. Your spells do stuff. So if you are snowballing with your Mana Wyrm, it probably means you're killing all your opponent's minions and drawing cards and setting up secrets that deal damage or counter spells. So it's kind of actually got its own acceleration to it.
Yeah, so that was in Secret Mage. I feel like Mana Wyrm's power is just so apparent, like, because the goal of that deck is to play an early Secret and then use that to lock your opponent out of doing anything for a turn, and then take the free turn you got really early and convert it to a victory. So, like, if you play Mana Wyrm and then you have a counterspell to back it up or an explosive runes, then, like, you play a spell or two to buff it, and then so let's say you have an awesome play. You're like, okay, Mana Wyrm turn 2, Arcanologist turn 3, Kirin Tormage with a Secret. So if it's explosive runes, your opponent basically has to have a kill spell they can point at your Mana Wyrm, but then at that point you'll have these other minions that are good and will just close the game for you, like Kirin Tormage. And if it's a counter spell, then they need to be able to play a minion, and they don't actually know which one it is. So they could just pick the wrong one and then lose. But either way, you reduce the number of options your opponent has to deal with your existing minions, and one of them is this Mana Wyrm that's been growing.
Yeah, since it's this, as much as it can become very powerful and do all this damage, it is vulnerable to the right removal spell. Like, pretty much in Hearthstone, at least, all of the Snowball cards are minions. So if you have the right removal spell, you can't, it has to be inexpensive. You can stop the Snowball, but if you have a counter spell, then you can, keep your Mana Wyrm rolling. So that was, like, a particularly, like you said, ruthless thing about it in Tempo Mage. And then Token Druid did this too. They would play... like when Innervate gave you 2 mana, they would play Innervate and a Firefly and a Pirate and pull patches out, and then play Market Lotus and give them all +1/+1.
Oh, you forget it. You have like 6 mana worth of creatures on the board.
But that's not where it stops. Like, that doesn't win the game, because then the next turn they play Power of the Wild and give them all +1/+1 again, and then the turn after that they play another minion, or they play Savage Roar. Like, the amount that one also increase. Like, if you don't stop that first ball that's rolling at the very beginning, which is very difficult to do because it's distributed amongst 3 different minions, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you just get deeper and deeper in the hole. And I mean, in a way, Mana Wyrm does that because, like, even though it's growing at like a fixed rate, you can play more spells on later turns, but you don't draw more cards, so you're limited by the number of cards in your hand. So it's going to grow at some fixed rate, but every turn you're getting closer to fireball range or double fireball range is like worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The damage that you deal becomes more valuable when your opponent's, at a certain point, or at least in a class like Mage.
Yeah.
Like, definitely. If they're 2, dealing 1 to them is a big deal, because then you can hero power them, for instance. So that 1 damage is worth way more than putting them from 30 to 29.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a really tough thing I think for people to learn, or it took me a long time to appreciate that properly. Like when you play against somebody and they turn 1 just lightning bolt you, like in Hearthstone. I mean,
right?
Like, okay, we need to chat.
Yeah,
you're missing something here. It's very important.
Yeah, because life is the life is a resource chat. I think kind of like covers that base.
Yeah.
You realize that when you take someone from 30 to 27, you don't actually take any options from them.
They don't. They just shrug that off. I have plenty of that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you take similarly, if you blow your hand and take them to 5, that's the same thing. Like, you might not have taken any options away from them. If you have no cards, they don't need to do anything. All they need to do is play a taunt minion and have a removal spell in their hand, and then you're probably not going to be able to take them from 5 to 0. But like, if you if somebody doesn't have that stuff and you take them from 2 to 1, or you take them from 3 to 2, and you're playing as mage, you know that like you're putting a clock on their head.
Yeah, regardless of what you draw. So that's I forget which. Oh yeah, we're still talking about Mana Wyrm. So I mean, these are reasons why it seems like it could still be good, but it was a really big deal that it came out turn 1.
Yeah, definitely.
And it could be. I mean, when you're the one pushing the snowball, that's a pretty fun time, right? Like obliterating someone with a vicious fledgling is fun, and some of them like are more like making questing adventurer good isn't easy. And the turns that you see someone playing old school Miracle Rogue with questing adventure and they make it work and go off with it, that's like a cool thing to see. Unless you're the person getting attacked by it, I guess. So there's like definitely good things about them, and things like questing adventure, Mana Wyrm, those aren't just for free, right? Those require that the player do some work. Even the fledgling, it requires that you can do a good job protecting it, or else it's really just going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, you need to protect it for, like, at minimum 1 turn, which is why it can be, like, so annoying, because often if it connects and doesn't get Wind Fury, or even if it does, it can make itself stealthed or make itself have a lot more health.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's gonna... Well, you need to keep the board clear, basically, before you even play it. Like, if your opponent has a 2-1 and a 1-1, when you play it, that's not going to work out. So you need to keep you need to, like... And it helps a lot if you maybe have your own minions out in addition to the fledgling to kill anything that they play, and have a weapon. And that's why it's good in Odd Rogue, because Odd Rogue will do that.
Oh, sure.
Odd Rogue will have a great weapon and probably also their own 1-drop to contest the board and make room for the fledgling to just take the game.
So another card that's similar to Mana Wyrm is Murloc Tidecaller.
Oh yeah. That's the 1/2.
Yes.
For 1 that gets +1 attack whenever you play Murloc.
Yeah, so it's, I think, worse and more conditional, definitely. Yeah. But because of the suite of cards that were available, in practice, it ended up being really powerful. Like with Rockpool Hunter.
Yes, it was one of the best cards to have in your opening hand when you're playing the Murloc deck, because it could snowball for you.
Yeah, definitely. Right. It could just get the ball rolling, and like, especially if you're playing Paladin, you can play a Righteous Protector to protect this thing and let it really just go to town. If you have a slow hand, or if you have a fast hand, you could just like Tidecaller, Rockpool Hunter, and then play a 3-drop Murloc. What if there's a couple that are really great, and any of them would make this stronger, either by giving it more attack or by giving it more health. So it's this was another example of one such card that could just take games early by getting bigger and becoming more of a problem. And, it starts on turn 1. You really just need to answer it right away. It evokes like much the same feeling that the Mana Wyrm evokes.
Henge Clan Thug can do that, or definitely does do that. Frothing Berserker kind of did that in Pirate Warrior as well. Like, if you just play that Berserker turn 3 and it doesn't die, you're odds are you're gonna... Like, if they every turn they don't have the answer, things get so much worse for them. Because they're probably trying to play things to kill it, and you're just not you're just not having that, and using your weapon and charge minions and your other pirates to just keep them from doing anything, and every turn that happens, your Berserker gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that doesn't take long to become fatal.
A cruel deck. Tunnel Trog was another decent example.
Tunnel
actually
Trog.
The same effect.
Yeah, 1 mana, 1/3. Yeah. And I think people didn't enjoy that very much, or a lot of people didn't enjoy that. So I think part of their decision about Mana Wyrm was informed by the experience with Tunnel Trog.
I think so too. Yeah, because that was sort of notoriously unfun card. Like, a lot of people really didn't like the Tunnel Trog Totem Golem metagame. So I think, Yeah, I think you're right in pointing out that their Mana Wyrm decision probably has a lot to do with Tunnel Trog.
Surprised I didn't think of that, because he's a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, it's 1-to-1 in that deck versus this deck. I mean, there were other problems in the mid-range Shaman deck of yore, but like Totem Golem. But it's definitely, Tunnel Trog played no small part. That was a really, really good card.
Good times.
Yeah, so what do you say about calling it there?
I think that's great. Ended on fond memories of aggro Shaman. Playing
that
Doomhammer and Rockbiter Weapon for 1 mana.
Yeah, that was the first deck I tried to push Legend with, was mid-range, and the first deck I actually got Legend with was the aggro deck that came after Mean Streets. So I also have fond memories of those cards.
Oh yes, sweet memories for you.
Well, if you, dear listener, want to have some sweet memories, you can come check us out on the internet. So, you open up your Chrome browser, and you go to lastturnhs.com. You go to Google, you Google google.com. Then you search lastturnhs.com. You click the link. And from there, you can navigate to any of our other profiles. So you can find us on SoundCloud or on Podbean, and just search Last Turn there. You can also find us on iTunes or Google Play, if that's how you tend to get your podcasts. Mm-hmm. But you can also follow us on social media. So we are on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at lastturnhs. Mm-hmm. There's probably some other places that I'm forgetting to mention.
There's YouTube.
We have our YouTube,
oh, yeah.
Where you can come and listen to all of our content on YouTube.
Whenever you finish listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, you can listen to our Some podcast.
Yeah, just come on over after you're done watching, PewDiePie or
Ninja, right? That was
he's a Twitch streamer.
Yeah, he was. But I mean, he was on YouTube, right?
Of course, definitely. Yeah, you want to watch some old sick Ninja Fortnite plays and be like, man, I know a game's a lot like Fortnite. You can come watch us talk about Hearthstone.
Yeah, it's basically like, Blizzard Fortnite, right? Hearthstone.
Yeah, it's the original battle royale.
It's just with 98 fewer players.
It doesn't feel like that when your opponent's playing Grim Patron.
This is true. All right, maybe everybody should get out of here.
Yeah, all right. We'll catch you guys next turn.
See you next turn, folks. Thanks for listening.